It's with great pleasure that I welcome back Dr. Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert, the title sponsor of the College Admissions Process podcast. Sean, you have a special message for the listeners?
Hey, John, I just wanted to mention for all the parents and students who are listening to this great podcast, we have a really special offer only for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast for Prep Expert. So if your student is going to be taking an online SAT, ACT, PSAT course anytime soon, or is looking for one-on-one tutoring with top 1% tutors, head over to prepexpert.com. We offer live online courses for every college admissions exam. On top of that, we have the best score guarantees, best curriculum, and best instructors in the test prep industry. And just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast, you can get 20% off any online SAT or PSAT or ACT course, as well as one-on-one tutoring. So you can get 20% off. Just make sure you use the promo code College Talk. That's one word, College Talk, and you'll get 20% off just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast. And I hope you guys can use that to your advantage, save a bunch of money at prepexpert.com.
Thank you so much, Sean. And to everyone out there, once again, that promo code is College Talk. That's one word, College Talk. Thank you all, and best wishes. Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome back Carlos Cano, who's the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at the Stevens Institute of Technology, located in beautiful Hoboken, New Jersey. Carlos, thank you so much for coming back. It was great seeing you at NACAC. How you doing today?
John, I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for having me back. Great to see you at NACAC, of course. Feels like it was a blur ago, but it was a while back. And congratulations once again on your recognition for the podcast. I think that's super awesome. The work that you're doing here is absolutely phenomenal, and I'm sure is helping a lot of people out there.
Well, I really appreciate that, Carlos, more than you know, especially for someone like you, Director of Undergraduate Admissions from Stevens, someone who's really, deep in the work of college admissions. And yes, it was a blur. It seems like it was only a couple of weeks ago, but guess what? The beauty is that we get to go back next year and hopefully we see each other again in person. So, Carlos, since our last conversation back in December of 2024, what new initiatives, programs, or campus developments at Stevens should students and families know about?
Yeah, so the first thing is for the incoming fall 2026 class, the institution has rolled out something called the Stevens Investment. The Stevens Investment is a program that allows students who demonstrate financial need. So by completing the financial aid applications, the FAFSA, the CSS profile, which we asked for as a part of our process, for students and families that make less than $75,000 as a family income, they will be eligible to have all of their tuition need met by the institution. So this is something that is very near and dear to us. It's part of our strategic plan, part of our enrollment goals, if you will, in terms of being able to allow access and opportunity for students that demonstrate that financial need. So that's definitely one thing on the, again, affordability side and the access side. From an academic standpoint, we just rolled out a brand new major for starting in fall 2026 in artificial intelligence, which is one of the few undergraduate programs that's available in the country. Artificial intelligence has rolled out in mass and graduate programs and beyond, but at the undergraduate level, it's still really in its infancy. And so, of course, Stevens, being a leader in this space, has finally rolled out its own undergraduate program, and we'll be bringing in our first class for fall 2026 into that major.
Well, that's terrific. I appreciate you giving the overview about the Stevens investment, trying to give access to all of your students, which I think is terrific. And you have a new major, shockingly, in AI, right? Because even though it's somewhat new to so many of us, that is definitely something that's not going away anytime soon. And of course, Stevens is a leader in technology, STEM, AI, and what have you. So, Carlos, how would you describe Stevens's core mission and philosophy, and how do these principles shape the student experience both inside and outside of your awesome classrooms?
So Stevens, and I know I alluded to this when I first was on with you, and it's interesting to me as I sit here and think about it. When we first spoke, I was only about 6 or 7 months into my role at Stevens, so in so many ways, I was still learning. I was literally learning as I was talking to you, and now that I'm about to start year three, over at Stevens, it is a complete 180 in terms of that learning curve, right? And so what I will base my response is in exactly what I said to you the first time. The institution lives by its motto, which is inspired by humanity and powered by technology. And so it's bridging that gap between technology and the real world, between technology and still having those immediate impact conversations and interactions that really allow for our students that come to Stevens for their preparation to go out into the real world as thought leaders, as innovators, but also as good people, as good stewards of resources and information, as well as just being people that pay it forward, right? So they're looking to advance, but also while staying humble and staying true to their own morals and their identity as well. And so this is something that we continue to push forward in many different ways. Again, addressing the need for an undergraduate program in something like artificial intelligence, but still staying founded in the things that got us to the quote unquote dance, if you will, right? So our programs in engineering are still our bedrock programs at the institution, which have a history that goes way back into the late 1800s. And so, even in those spaces, the institution continues to drive forward in being a leader in generating students and generating professionals that go out into the world ready for their careers in engineering and in computing and in so many of the different things that Stevens has to offer.
Well, I love what you said. You are an institution that is inspired by humanity and empowered by technology, which is awesome because obviously you're a leader in the STEM field, but you're also very big on humanity and producing great people. Now, Carlos, Stevens is also known for that strong technology focus. How do you support students who want to combine technical skills with areas such as business, entrepreneurship, or the arts?
That is one of the most popular conversations I have with students and their families, especially as I'm out on the road recruiting. And we leverage our location first and foremost, right? So, from a business standpoint, it's a no brainer. We're in Hoboken. Hoboken is literally adjacent to Jersey City, which is a prime financial hub. Many people will call it the extra borough of New York City, if you will, but then we also have New York City right across the river. So when it comes to internships and job shadowing and all of those things, our students in the business sector are ready to go out into the world because of those practical and professional experiences that they're able to get. In the humanities is also an area that's super underrated for us. People don't think of coming to an institute of technology to study something like philosophy or music or the visual arts. But even when we talk about music and the visual arts, we're talking about being right near a hub that lends itself to opportunities in those areas, particularly in New Jersey right now, where there has been a huge boom of companies and entities wanting to come to New Jersey to do things like shoot television shows, movies, content creators that come out into the state to do a lot of work. And so Stevens is staying ahead of the game and being very proactive about reaching out to, for example, again, Netflix is developing a studio in New Jersey at Fort Monmouth. And so we're working on getting partnerships with them so that our students in music, in the visual arts, in even areas like literature, for example, where they might be doing writing and they could be doing screenwriting or anything of that sort. How do we leverage the students that we have to get them the practical experience that they need to break out into those fields? And so all that being said, we try to stay ahead as much as possible with maintaining those professional connections out in the field so that our students can have the best experience possible.
Well, you definitely do a great job staying ahead, building those relationships and those connections. I love how you're so into the interdisciplinary studies because, yes, you're a leader in the STEM fields, but you understand the importance of having a background in philosophy, art, music, perhaps business. And of course, you're located in beautiful Hoboken, New Jersey, as you put it, adjacent to Jersey City, which, yes, is like a sixth borough of New York City, and if you will. And let's not forget that you're right across from the awesome New York City. So in terms of job shadowing and internships, there are so many opportunities for your students while at Stevens, but also beyond. Now, Stevens attracts students with varying levels of exposure to STEM while in high school. Carlos, how does your admissions team assess potential readiness for the rigor of the technological programs that you offer at Stevens?
When we look at students who apply to the institution, we're looking for them to be, of course, academically prepared, that they keep themselves academically challenged. So we look for a nice, healthy mix of the rigor and the academics. So I tell students in particular and parents as well, we don't expect for every student to take every AP and or every IB or even every honors course or dual enrollment for that matter. You need to play to your strengths. You need to keep yourself challenged the throughout your time in high school. More importantly, you need to be realistic and aware of what kind of a preparation do I need for the major that I intend to go into. At Stevens, for example, for I'll use engineering as the example because it's always the one that comes up most frequently. At Stevens, we have several different disciplines in engineering, but we also have an engineering undecided component. So for students that are not 100% sure as to what it is that they want to do in engineering or in any of our other areas for that matter, they can come in as blank undecided, business undecided, engineering undecided, and so forth. And why I mention that is because even though you may not know what specific field you want to go into, that foundational preparation is going to be the same across the board. So, for our engineering students in particular, we're looking for them to have completed calculus by the time they become a senior, or that they're sitting in calculus as a senior in high school. Now, the million dollar question always is, Carlos, my school offers AP and they offer an honors course. Or even quite the flip side, students may say to me, Carlos, my school doesn't offer an AP calculus course. It's only available at the honors level. Is that okay? And the answer is it's okay. Obviously, if your school doesn't offer it, there's nothing you can do about that. You can only do with what you can control. And so take that calculus course at whatever level it is. If you have the choice of doing AP or honors or something else, play to your strengths. So if you know that mathematics is comes easy to you, you know that you're going to get that sure shot A, that you're going to get that 5 on that AP exam, then that's a no-brainer. Take that AP course because you know you're going to do well in it. Now, if you know that math is not your strong suit, something that you may need to work a little bit harder towards, maybe that's the course that you say, you know what, I'm going to lean back a little bit. I'm going to take the honors level course and I'm going to work my butt off so that I get that great grade. But I don't want to go into the AP course because I don't want to struggle from jump, right? And I don't want to feel like I just have to keep trying to catch up. Whereas you have more flexibility and more wiggle room. All to say that you need to understand yourself as a student. For parents, you need to also understand where your student is at and not just say, you have to take the AP course, even if you're not good at math, but you need to take the AP course because that's what colleges want. No, we want to see where you're going to thrive the most, where you're going to be the best at, So that's ultimately what you should go with.
Well, I think that's great advice. You talk first about understanding yourself, but you pointed to the fact that students, you have to look at the context of your high school. If your high school only offers a general calculus class, or perhaps they offer only honors calculus without the AP, then that's what's available to you. Take what is there in front of you and do the absolute best that you can. Now, to Carlos's point, if you could take the AP Calculus course, AP Calculus AB, BC, whatever your course offers, and certainly you're able to get a 5, well, that's a great indication that you're ready to handle the work once you're on the beautiful Stevens campus, especially if you're looking to a competitive major such as engineering. Now, another thing, Carlos, that so many students and families really want to hear about is once they submit their application, what does your evaluation process actually look like? In other words, how many readers typically review a file, and what factors shape your committee's decisions?
So this is always a great question. I get that mostly from parents. I think students in general just know that someone reads it, right? And they don't necessarily care about who specifically or even how many people. But I think it's important to have some context when and if possible on this process. So at Stevens, we will have anywhere between 2 to 4 people, maybe five at the very most, go through an application. And the reason why there's such variance for at an institution like ours, which is fairly competitive and we continue to get more and more competitive over the years, is that for students that we may find to be borderline for any number of reasons, could be the academic rigor, it could be test scores if they choose to submit, and so forth. We just need several eyes to have a look to either confirm or, in some cases, be against whatever that first person that laid eyes on it has, or the second person. And so we go through a process where there are sure shot candidates that go through and two people read it and that's a done deal. They're very straightforward admits. There are some that are not so straightforward, but I always frame it from the context of we're looking for reasons to admit students and not reasons to deny students. And so many times we need to go through multiple layers of our review process just to continue to find more reasons to potentially need to admit students. At Stevens, we have the unique situation where we're not looking to exponentially grow. We can't. We're landlocked in Hoboken, so we can't put a new building up somewhere or anything like that. It doesn't come as easy. So we're in a situation where we've gotten more competitive, not only because the student themselves is more competitive on paper, but simply because we can't admit all of these great students. And so a lot of times things like demonstrated interest come into a big factor, and that's always a question that I get during recruitment as well, is how we utilize demonstrated interest, which we do. And so there are different layers. I always consider our process at Stevens an onion, because you can peel back different layers, and depending on the student and the academic year and so on, that onion can peel back very differently. And again, in the instance of the student in particular, that can also look very different as well. How good are they academically? Are they really serious and interested in Stevens, or did they just apply because it was easy to check off the box and include us in the process? So these are all things that we're looking at through and through. But what I'd like to think anyway, is that we do a pretty good job of selecting students because they continue to stay. We have among some of the highest retention rates in the country, well above the national average, into the mid 90th percentile from year one to year two. And so we're doing something right. Our team is doing something right at Stevens because our students, we're selecting them, they're choosing Stevens, and they're very intentional about staying and seeing through their experience.
Well, that is amazing. Having a retention rate in the mid 90s is well above the national average. I also love how you talked about the fact that you are looking for reasons to admit students and not to deny students. That is a very important point. And you also talked about the fact that you do track demonstrated interest students. That's an important thing to know. Definitely visit if you can. Engage with the emails. Make sure you're clicking on the links. Make sure you're attending the virtual events. If you do visit, reach out to your admissions representative, let them know what your impressions. If you have a question, especially if it's a question not so easily found on the website, feel free to ask the thoughtful question of the admissions representative, giving them the indications that you, in fact, want to attend Stevens if you are admitted. And it's important, students, to also understand each part of the application, to give them the reasons to admit you, to do a thorough job covering every single piece, because we say it all the time on the podcast episode. If you're leaving it up to the admissions rep to speculate about something, why your activities list is not that deep, why there was a dip in grades and you didn't provide any context way back in ninth grade or 10th grade, you really need to provide that, again, to give them reasons to admit. Now, Carlos, every college shapes its incoming class with certain institutional priorities. And I remember you mentioning that you are landlocked, so it's not like you could just build another building or two on your campus and decide to admit more students. But how do these institutional priorities influence the way your team builds that first year class?
They're very significant, and it's not anything that we hide, for sure. All of these institutional priorities are part of strategic planning and strategic goals that are all readily available to the public and are things that we share. The most I think the most, upfront and the most common one that I talk about, of course, is increasing our female population. Females in STEM are in high demand. And so, yes, if you are a strong student, if you check off many of the boxes with regards to the applicant profile that we're looking for, and you're a female student, we definitely want you at Stevens because, again, we're looking to continue to increase not only our student population, but just big picture. STEM is always continually looking for more females in their field, in engineering, in the sciences. We offer one of the more competitive 7-year BS to MD programs, right? So all of those things are linked. And so it's important for us to recognize that during our recruitment and application review process. One of the other institutional priorities that's front and center for us is increasing our out of state population. So, an overwhelming majority of our students, of course, come from the great state of New Jersey. We love our New Jersey students, but we also love our students from out of state as well. This past year, we brought in a class that represented 47 of the 50 states. And so, for me, as the director of undergraduate admissions, as I look at our strategic goals where I know that we want to increase our out of state population, I want to make sure that our territory managers are going back into their respective markets and trying to get more of the best and brightest. But I'm also thinking, how do I make it 50 out of 50? I want at least one student from every state and territory in the United States to come to Stevens. So over the past couple of years, we've been very intentional with recruitment in places like Puerto Rico and in the Virgin Islands. I had my first prospective student touch base with me this past year from Guam, which is super cool. Like these are places that you don't necessarily think about, but as a director of undergraduate admissions and as you're looking to lock in on those institutional goals, you have to try and have a footprint in as many places as possible, whether it's a physical footprint or a digital footprint. But again, all to say that as we're going about our recruitment plans, as we're going about application review, these are all things that we have well in mind. They're not the end all be all because, as I say to students and families all the time, the bread and butter, the biggest bread and butter of this process is ultimately the academic piece, is what you look like on your transcript, not just the GPA and not just that number, but how that GPA is related to your academic rigor, to what you're doing outside of the classroom. And so that's really the foundation of it. And then we start to layer in all of our other priorities.
Well, that's a great overview. We appreciate it. And would you be able to share with us, in other words, what is the institutional priority in terms of the number of freshmen that you want to admit, but also giving some insight in terms of the number of overall applications, again, the number of the freshman class you want to admit, and perhaps how you use the wait list, for example, to manage, yields and things like that to make sure that as the Director of Undergraduate Admissions, you're meeting all of the numbers that you have to meet for the great institution.
Sure. So this current year, we're looking at about 10 to 11% increase in applications. And again, that for us is a great thing. It gives us more of a pool to look at. We're seeing a lot more diversity in our pool with regards to, again, the things that I mentioned with regards to male, female, in state, out of state, and things of that sort. We, as I mentioned, and as you alluded to again, we're not in a place where we're looking to grow exponentially by any stretch of the imagination. So our growth will be modest, anywhere between 1 to 2% for the incoming class. For the upcoming year, we did bring in our largest first year class for fall 2025. And so we're looking to grow just a touch, again, just to account for attrition and things like that in year 2 and year 3 and so on for our students. But what we also know at Stevens is that we have made some intentional changes to our cooperative education program for our students in engineering and in computer science to allow them to complete that experience within 4 years. So in the past, students in those programs would be around for an extra year to complete all of their classroom requirements to graduate. And so looking at that means that from an enrollment standpoint, we also have to stay ahead of the curve so that our enrollment doesn't dip significantly either. We, in other words, want to remain flat, if not a little bit higher than we have been in previous years in terms of our overall enrollment, which is right now just a touch over 4,000 students at the undergraduate level. That's not just because, again, we can't grow exponentially, like I said, but it's also part of the Stevens experience. The fact that we are a smaller undergraduate population, which is unique for us because so many of our graduate students are in the virtual space. So when students are on campus, on paper, we're a population of anywhere between 85 to 8,700 students altogether, but physically on campus, it's really only the undergraduate population that's on campus with maybe a couple hundred, close to 1,000 graduate students. But it's a much smaller environment than what it looks like on paper. And so, as we consider all of those things, and in staying true to who we are as an institution from a size perspective, is how we ultimately leverage what we're doing in terms of recruitment and getting the folks into our application pool that we want, but then also leveraging things like the wait list to determine students that, in the grand scheme of things, want to be here at Stevens. But again, based on space, we just can't have them all at the same time. So we have to be very intentional about that.
Hey, podcast friends, if you've been enjoying the College Admissions Process podcast, I'm excited to share my new book, Straight from the Admissions Office, Insider Strategies for College Applications. It's packed with insights and tips from over 250 podcast episodes with admissions professionals designed to make the college process less overwhelming. Whether you're a student, parent, or college counselor, it's a valuable resource for navigating the admissions process. By grabbing a copy, you're also helping to support the podcast. The links are in the show notes. Thank you, and best wishes to all with the college admissions process. Definitely have to be intentional, and I appreciate you pulling the curtain back a little bit just to give us some insights and some of the decisions that you and your team have to make. Now, Carlos, what is Stevens' current approach to standardized tests, and what advice would you give students? This is a question that I always hear myself about advice in terms of whether to submit scores or not.
I'm super proud to share that Stevens will remain test optional through fall of 2029. So we had been in, I don't want to say in limbo, but we were doing our due diligence. So we had a committee that was developed on campus that involved faculty and other staff to take a look at all of the data with regards to test scores, how those students retain, how they perform academically, In a nutshell, what we found is that there was very little difference between students that submitted test scores versus the students that didn't. That really what it came down to was the academic transcript, the level of the academic rigor, and then how that ultimately correlated to their performance on campus. So, with all of that, the institution made the decision to go test optional for another 3 years. What that will allow us to do is to obtain more data, not only from the retention standpoint, but how those students are doing on an outcomes basis. So once they graduate, are they still getting those full time job opportunities at the clip that we've always gotten them over the course of time? So that rate has always been anywhere in the 90th percentile of our students that within 6 months of graduation are finding jobs within their field of study. So having 3 more years of data will allow another analysis to continue and to happen so that we can hopefully, for the more long term, have a more concrete, not that it isn't concrete now, but even more concrete test optional policy. The $1 million question, John, and students, I get this from them all the time, as you probably do as well, is do I submit or not? And my response is probably more practical for the student. And I think sometimes when I give it, students usually look at me a little funny because I don't think it's the response that they expect. And my response to them is if this is keeping you up at night, if this is creating anxiety and angst about your process, don't submit it. It's one less thing for you to worry about. I always take a step back and provide the caveat that, as we know, the most popular answer in college admissions is it depends. So it's important for a student to understand what standardized testing means at an institution that they're interested in, because for us, again, if you don't submit it, it's just one less thing that we have to know about you, but it doesn't make or break your application. For other institutions, that may not be the case. They may need that piece of information to determine because they feel like it brings value to their incoming class. And you may have some other schools that tell you, we don't want it at all. And if you submit it, we're not even looking at it. So it doesn't matter. So we're, I think, more in the middle, and I come at it from more in the middle in terms of, again, if it's stressing you out, if it's burdening you, don't let it. Just don't submit it. That's the reason why it's test optional, is because you ultimately have the choice as to whether or not you want to submit your scores. And if it's making you anxious, if it's making you stressed, this process is supposed to be fun. So don't let an arbitrary number as a test score define how you go about this process.
Well, we appreciate that. Carlos, are you able to share more or less the percentage of students that submitted that were also accepted?
So for fall 2025, ironically, I kid you not, it was literally right down the middle. 50% of our applicant pool submitted test scores. 50% of our admits were students with test scores. 50% of the students that enrolled had test scores. And that is not by design or by intention by any stretch of the imagination. It's just for us at Stevens, it is not the breaking point. It is not the end all be all. We place a lot more of an emphasis on your academic transcript and the academic rigor versus your test scores.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all because in most schools where they're reporting being test optional, it's actually pretty much a 50-50 split in terms of the percentage of students that submitted or not that were actually admitted. Now, you also talked about the academic transcript, which again, most admissions reps are reporting that in terms of the academics, that is in fact the most important piece because it gives you 4 years of opportunities. It shows based on the context of the student's high school, what did they select to take over 4 years, the ramps that they built, how they performed. And so that is something that in terms of the academics is number one, reported by rep after rep after rep on the podcast. Now, Carlos, the activities section of the Common Application is limited in terms of how many characters, not words, but how many characters you can actually use. How important is it for applicants to communicate their motivation, leadership, or impact in that section? And can you share an example of a student who did this exceptionally well in such a limited space?
For us at Stevens, the activities section is super important. I would say that for us, right after we look at the academic piece, which arguably is part that takes the most time as we go through what courses you've taken and whatnot, that next piece is very important to us from the perspective of it gives us an idea of how you're able to best manage your time relative to how you're doing in the classroom. So again, taking those challenging courses, doing well in those courses, and then taking on the opportunities that you have outside of the classroom. Quality versus quantity is my immediate suggestion and recommendation to students. I don't need to know every single little thing that you did. I tell students jokingly, say, if you showed up for a club, a club meeting just once, just to be able to say, hey, I did this club, I'm going to add it to my activity sheet. That means absolutely nothing to us in the grand scheme of things. Because if we come into contact with you, let's say in an interview, and you have this listed on your application and we're asking you about it, you can't really speak to it. You're not doing yourself any favors and you're certainly not, helping us in any way. We want things that you will be able to speak to in a way that shows your commitment and your dedication and your passion towards something. So, whether you did it for a year, something you've done for 4 years, the other piece is that we also understand that the responsibilities that a student has these days is very different. So there may not be the opportunity to participate in all of the clubs and activities like some other students can, because maybe you're a caretaker for an elderly member of the family or for a sibling. But don't sell yourself short. Those things are just as important as being a varsity athlete, being on the robotics team. So don't sell yourself short and not tell us about those things. And the Common App this year has allowed for students to be able to share when they are involved with some of these extracurriculars that are not your traditional extracurriculars, right, on paper. And so tell us about those things. Speak to them in your essay, in your not only in your Common App essay, but if your institution that you're applying to has a supplemental piece, which Stevens does. Uh, if you interview, make sure that you speak to those things as well, or drop us an email. I love students that will reach out and will say, to your point, John, the Common App only has X amount of characters, and a student feels like, man, I wasn't able to convey everything that I wanted to share. How can I do that? And you do that again by having that rapport and that relationship with your admissions counselor at an institution where you can send off that email and say, Carlos, I wasn't able to get all of the information across in my Common App, but can you add this to my application so that whoever's reading it can know and is aware of these other things that I really wasn't able to list?
Well, I appreciate that. And it goes back to what you said earlier. You're looking for reasons to admit a student. And so you have to be comprehensive student in each part. We just reviewed the activity section, and Carlos pointed to the fact that it's really more about quality than just quantity. So if you just showed up at a club for one meeting, that's something that they don't necessarily want to hear about, because they want you to join clubs with purpose. They want you to be able to speak to your values, why you joined the club. And if you're asked a question about it, they want to know that, again, you did it with intention, not that you just showed up once. Now, you mentioned the personal statement, you mentioned the supplemental, which are also really important parts of the overall application. And so, Carlos, the personal statement is often where students feel the most pressure to stand out, probably because, unlike the transcript, which at the time that you're submitting the application in the fall of senior year, ninth, 10th, 11th grade, guess what? They're already completed. You're looking at that point in time when you're submitting applications in terms of 12th grade, just a work in progress. But with the personal statement, it is a clean slate. So, Carlos, what makes an essay genuinely compelling for your admissions team to read? And what common pitfalls do you often see?
I'll start with the pitfalls first. Students always feel like it's two things, I think, and I feel like if they expanded their horizons a little bit more, they'd probably get better content for their essays. But I think students are always quick to share the game-winning shot, and I use that as the proverbial in quotes example, right? Like you're the star athlete and you made the game-winning shot. Or by contrast, you're the star athlete that experienced a major injury and that was a setback, and now you're needing to come back. I don't say that those things in light, like I know they happen and they're real, but from our perspective, we read about those things more often than people care to think about. And so I challenge students to really think outside of the box with regards to that. Unless your story can tell me something different beyond I play basketball, I was playing, I tore my ACL, I rehabbed, and I came back. Like, I know those things are real, but again, we're reading that more often than you care to think. If there's something in that timeline that I just outlined, for example, that is very specific, that it's something that you uncovered or something that you figured out during the scope of that. So I know that I've read essays, for example, where they're talking about that timeline, but they will mention that during that timeline. So for example, while I was rehabbing my injury, I discovered an interest in X. And I really took this opportunity to branch out on this new interest in this new endeavor. Like, that's cool. Like, that's what those are the kinds of things that we want to hear about. Essays and prompts that elicit some form of emotion. I've read essays that have made me laugh, that have made me cry, that have made me really think outside of my own box, because they're a little bit more thought provoking. Like those are the kinds of things that we're looking for as well. I think a lot of times students also feel like they have to tell us something specific about themselves, and you don't have to do that. Maybe you're a really good writer and you're a really good storyteller. And so you can, in your essay, use a story that you've written. I think one of the most undervalued and underrated Common App prompts is the one where you can select something that you've already written for a class and submit it as your writing piece, as your essay. I wish more students did that because I think students probably do a lot of great writing for classes that they don't give themselves credit. And then when it comes to the supplemental question, institutions typically ask that because they want something very specific. And so, with that in mind, answer the question. I am flabbergasted by the amount of supplemental essays that I read where we delineate the question very intentionally, and I think as specifically as you can get, and the answers are way out in foul territory. Like they don't even come close to answering what it is that we've highlighted, which is ultimately at the end of the day, we need you to tell us why you want to come to Stevens. Like there's really nothing else behind it. We've come up with a more clever way of doing that. So what we've done for this year is we've taken our tagline, are inspired by humanity, powered by technology, and remove the last word from each line. We ask the student to fill that in with what inspires them and what powers them, and to tell us why. And I've read some really, really great responses to that, and I've read some not so good ones.
I can only imagine. And it goes back to what you said earlier in terms of the personal statement. One of the topics that so many students write about, it's either a sports injury or getting that winning shot right at the game. And so what students need to understand is that there are human beings on the other side reading the personal statements. It's not fed into an AI program where it's not a human being reading it. So at the heart of reading applications, I would imagine that admissions reps are reading 40 to 50 essays a day, perhaps. And so students, think about it. If you're reading 40 to 50 essays a day, and you're constantly seeing the theme of a sports injury or someone who won the winning shot, and there's not much more to the story other than that, something that you've read over and over again, there's human beings on the other side. So you definitely want to try to stand out and show your intention of whatever the topic is and really give insight in terms of who you are as a student and really talk about something that's not easily found on other parts of your application. If you're a soccer player, you probably have that listed in your activities section, I would imagine. And if you don't, you really need to rethink about the activities section because it's certainly something that if you're doing after school should be there. So you don't want to repeat it in the personal statement. And I also love how you talked about the supplemental essay and you said your core values, of course, are you're inspired by humanity and empowered by technology. Now, I would imagine in the supplemental, if students are able to express that they understand that as a core value at Stevens and talk about how that resonates with them and perhaps even show things that they've done in high school that's in line with that core value, along with talking about why Stevens, what they see themselves doing once they're on your campus. I would imagine, Carlos, that if they could convey that in the supplemental, that would certainly be something that would help students put them in a good light in terms of that portion of the overall application. Would you agree with that? And what more could you share about the supplemental?
Absolutely. For us, the supplemental is another piece of demonstrated interest. We want to understand not only what you know about Stevens, because it's easy to go on Google and Google Stevens and find the name of a professor or their research that they're doing and be able to connect those lines. I'm always more intrigued by the students who speak to their time on campus, whether they've come for a tour or an open house or they've participated in our pre-college programs, and they're able to leverage that supplement to connect the dots from the supplement to the experience that they want to talk about to ultimately why they feel that Stevens is a great fit for them. And so the better students are able to do that, and like I said, we've seen great examples of it so far this year where students have been able to do that, the more leverage you have in creating a stronger application. And I think this isn't just for Stevens, but this is true across the board for institutions that do offer that supplement is you want to connect those dots from your experience to your goals to how that institution plays into all of that together.
I think that's such a great point. Students, you want to show the connection that you've made with the institution. For example, if you Google Stevens and you find something about a professor and you write about that professor just because you Googled it, well, maybe that professor retired 5 years ago, and so you have to be very careful not to just Google something, which in these days most people can do. You have to be intentional in terms of expressing your understanding. Demonstrate your understanding of Stevens, why you want to be there, that you understand their core values. Maybe there is a professor that you met during a visit. Maybe there is something about a program that really resonates with you, again, is in line with what you've done in high school that makes you feel that, yeah, when I get there, these are the things that I'm going to do on your campus. If you could express things like that, you're going to put yourself in a better light in terms of the overall application for the supplemental part. Now, have you seen a clever way that students use the additional information section of the Common Application, Carlos? Because we always talk about looking at the application as an overall package and understanding what each part is intended for, how they need to complement each other, build upon each other, and perhaps not repeat information in multiple parts. But that additional information section, what have students done to help create a more complete picture of their overall story?
The additional information section, I think, is best utilized when there are intangibles and certain circumstances that you cannot check off a box with on the common application, or that you just simply have no way to quantify via the application because it's a little more open ended. You have a little bit more of an opportunity to think things out. and I can't say in the moment that I've seen a clever way to do it, but it's really just that opportunity to share something very upfront and very, again, intentionally, to be able to tell us that, I did this I was a part of, I think the most common example I've seen is I was an athlete for 4 years, but during my sophomore year, I wasn't able to play the full season because I got injured. But I was still going to the games and I was still supporting my teammates and so on and so forth, right? When you put that sport on your activities list, you're inclined to put 9 through 12 because you were involved for all 4 years. But you also want to be mindful and you want to be honest and upfront that, look, there was 1 year where because of one reason or another, I wasn't able to be involved to the level that you may think I was. But because I was injured, I wasn't able to play, but I was still there for my team again. And that what that shows us is it shows us more of those intangible characteristics, right? So in other words, even though you got knocked down by the injury, you were still committed and you were still dedicated to being a member of your team by supporting your teammates, by being the manager or just attending the games and doing those things. So again, the additional information section is really just a way to convey information that we may not otherwise have.
Well, such great advice and insights. We really appreciate it. And this has been a phenomenal conversation, as I knew it would be as I had you on before. Carlos, before I get to the last question, I always like to ask, is there a question I didn't ask today that you wish I had, or maybe a topic that just didn't come up in the conversation that you'd like to leave with us now?
Sure. I was on a high school panel recently where I was talking to the parents of high school juniors, and I have a high school junior at home. And so I connect and empathize now with them more than I ever have because I'm literally sitting and going through it and seeing how so many different things affect the path that your student goes through. And I think the one thing that I shared then, which I'll share with the audience here now, particularly for parents, is that your student, your child needs to drive this process. And again, there's another parallel, right? Because I have a 16-year-old who is starting to drive or wants to drive, wants her permit, wants the license, and all of those things. And it's very parallel. I have to sit in the passenger seat. I can't drive for her. I can't do it for her. She has to do it, but you have to work together. She has to be open-minded and have the open ears to listen and to take in information and advice. But at the end of the day, as the parent, you can only provide that insight. You can't do it for them because they're ultimately going to be the ones that for 4 years are at whatever institution they end up at. So they need to drive. You need to be in that passenger seat as the biggest cheerleader, as the biggest supporter, and not being the one that is like, no, 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 stop. Let's switch. I'm going to drive now. Don't do that for any number of reasons, but don't do that. Let them drive. They're going to, again, I'm making these driver's ed parallels, if you will, but at the beginning, they're going to check those brakes and they're going to forget to turn the turn signal and do some of the things that you as the adult, as the parent, have already done. You're in cruise control already, right? When they're still learning how to figure that out and how that all works. And so I share that with parents, and that would be the one thing that I would say. We spoke about parents, I think, throughout in pieces throughout our conversation today, but I think that part of the process is so important and it's so pivotal because we have to be there to support our kids in the best way possible.
Well, I think those are great pieces of advice. And you've given so much already. But of course, the last question always is, what are your top three pieces of advice for students and families going through the college admissions process?
The top three, I'm very practical, so I keep this very practical too because I don't think any of this needs to be overly complicated. So, number one is stay organized, whatever that looks like for you as a student and also as a parent, as a family member. Whether it's, I know there was a time where folks did this on paper and you kept all of the mail that you were getting for X school, you kept it in a folder. Maybe you still do that. We still send out hard mail, albeit we don't do it as much as we used to. I think now we're in the digital space, we're in that email space, right? Where you're getting tons and tons of emails. And yeah, you need to sort of filter through what you like, what you don't like, and keep those as organized as you can. And if you start doing it now when you're a prospective student, it keeps that organization intact as you become an applicant and as you become an admitted student at places so that you don't get information lost in the sauce and things of that sort. Number two is to visit campuses. I think that's probably the more old school in me, where I think getting the essence of the vibe that's on campus and physically stepping foot is still so important. I'm shocked by how many students don't come to visit campuses until after they've been admitted or even after they commit to an institution. So to me, it's super scary for students to commit places that they've never visited to, and it happens more often than not because the digital world provides us with so much access and so much convenience. So again, do the due diligence, step foot on our campuses so that you can make the best educated decision. And the last, which I think honestly is the most important, and I alluded to this earlier, is you need to have fun and enjoy this process. And so when you find yourself as a student or even as a parent where you're super stressed out about something in this process, and I'm the first to admit that I know on our end, we give you lots to be anxious and stressed about. But I think it's also important that when that happens, you need to take a step back and take a deep breath, reset, recenter, and then come back to it. Because this process at the end of the day is supposed to be fun for everyone involved. For the student, because it's the first big decision you get to make in your life as a student at you're 16, 17, 18 years old. And it's a big deal. You're talking about 4 years of the rest of your life. And for parents, it's super important too, because you're watching your child grow up. You're watching your child take that first step into adulthood and making that big decision. And it's something that should be celebrated. It should be applauded all the way around. And so again, take the opportunities when you need to take a step back and recenter and refocus so that when the victories come, you're ready to celebrate them in earnest.
Well, such great advice. This was an awesome conversation, Carlos. I'm so happy that I had you back. Can't thank you enough for pulling the curtain back and giving us insights not only into Stevens, but the overall admissions process. Carlos, you're awesome. Thank you again.
Thanks so much, John. Always a pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours. And to everyone out there, good luck with the college search. Take care all, and best wishes. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The CAP. Thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success.